produce a breakthrough in your life, individually, if you're on a team and the team is out to produce a breakthrough, how would you go about thinking about it? The first place you start to think about is you get in this kind of breakthrough state of mind. You get a breakthrough mindset, a breakthrough frame of reference. We want to do things that are bold and disruptive, and let's start thinking that way. Hence, when you go into your groups this afternoon, please just put on your virtual breakthrough cap. All right? Then we start to go, what's possible around here? What do we really want to accomplish? We're not going to do that today. Okay, we're going to skip that step today in terms of the goals, the aspiration. We're just going to play for the moon. We're just going to say, what would be breakthrough? And leave open the aim, the target. Because sometimes putting a target in front of you too soon could actually limit your thinking. We don't want to do that. So then you go, now if I'm going to produce a breakthrough, there are going to be some big gaps and chasms. Because bold isn't practical. What are the gaps and chasms that are not practical for me to cross right now? I'm going to talk you through that some more. Now I'm starting to get a register of the gaps and chasms to cross. That starts to give me the action plan. The action plan is really gaps and chasms. When I'm working with startups in growth, internal ventures, the action plan is hypotheses about the market we have to test. And we make a list of all of the hypotheses about how big this can be and how it'll be accepted and how to commercialize it. And then we start to go out and test the hypotheses. And that's where we start to come up with the action plan for building the business. So gaps and chasms, hypotheses, it's that kind of thing, give you the roadmap. Then you start to build the bridges, which is how are we going to cross the chasm? Then we start to take the action to build the bridges. And then part of breakthrough is you got to renew yourself. So that's where celebration, appreciation, making sure you're having fun, because breakthrough's intensive. Now, breakthrough mindset, bold made practical. You hear an idea and you go, that's a possibility. What was the thing we were talking about that your contractor said every time you... Not inconceivable. You were talking about this, that's a possibility. And he said, when my contractor was in remodeling the house, my wife and I would come up with all of these new ideas for what we wanted. And the contractor's answer to everything they said was, that's not inconceivable. You can see the guy, right? That's not inconceivable. So that's a possibility. So my wife and I, when we think about vacation, she'll throw out an idea for a vacation. And I'll go, I don't want that. And I have to self-correct and go, that's a possibility, honey. And as the words come out of my mouth, my attitude starts to change. Sometimes you got to get the words out of your mouth in order to get your brain lined up with your thinking. Now there's a possibility. The other thing is where do limits come from? In breakthrough, you make up the limits. There's a great philosopher called Jonathan Livingston Seagull. All right, you remember that book from like 30 years ago or something. And there's a quote in the book that says, argue for your limits and they're yours. That was me in December. Anybody can. That's a possibility. So how many of you went, that's a possibility. I'll give you the name and address of the place. How many of you went, come on, raise your hand. That's a possibility. Okay, great. How many of you went, no effing way? Okay, there's the limit. All right? So there was a woman who was in part of this was a 2-hour class. Now, there's a woman in the class with me who is petrified. Climbing up the ladder was petrifying for her. standing on the platform was petrifying for her. She's double strapped in. There are 2 hooks on her. She's on a rope. She's got on belay. There's a huge net. You know how many safety thingy-doos there are in that? And she is petrified. And the way the person up there is talking her through it is absolutely amazing. 1 step at a time, Bold was doing the trapeze. Practical was 1 step at a time. Grab on to the bar. Feel my hand pulling the back there. Lean forward, but feel I'm pulling you. Hold, grab the bar. She pulls back. You get to do 1 simple little step at a time. It took her 7 or 8 minutes, but all she managed to do was hold on to the bar, swing back and forth a couple of times, and let go. And that was so tremendous for her. Bold made practical. 1 step at a time. That's what we're talking about here. You can't make the practical bold on that one. You make the bold practical. So we have to stomp out. To do breakthrough, we have to stomp out the yeah buts. You know, I say bold and you go, yeah but. You know, you're not the only culture that does yeah but to death. So you have to stomp out yeah but. And do yes and. Pixar Animation does courses on creativity. The heart of the course that they do on creativity is what everybody says. The next person says, and then they put their idea. And then somebody else has another thing, and they go, and they put their idea in. And they, in 15, 20 minutes, come up with amazingly creative solutions because the juices are flowing and the energy's flowing, and they're coming up with all these ideas. Bold. Then they have to figure out how to make it practical. But yes, and gives you boldness collectively. Yeah, but gives you just more of the same. So, gaps and chasms. These are the kinds of gaps and chasms you want to identify. I don't want you to solve them first. I want you to identify them. Be bold about identifying the gaps that you have to close. So, big challenge gaps, what I call your aspirational ideas, the stuff that you've always wanted to make happen and never felt that there was an ecosystem, an environment that would enable you to do that. Aspirational ideas, what I call impossibles. Putting a man on the moon by the end of the decade, NASA had an office in NASA called the Office of the Impossible. And all the things that they needed to do that were technologically impossible started out there. And they had a process for addressing how you actually develop things that at the outset are technologically impossible. Because there's a way to do technologically impossible things. There's a way to go after culturally impossible things. So not only on impossibles do you put down technical impossibles, you put down cultural impossibles. They would never let me. That's an impossible. Get them down. You put down dilemmas and contradictions. What's an obvious contradiction we heard about yesterday? Quality and everything. Cost, reliability, time to market. You put those down because you know what? If you're going to produce a breakthrough, you got to solve them. You don't know how. That's fine. First, we got to get the chasms to cross. The undiscussables. The things you can't talk about. They're scary as holy heck to actually bring that subject up. That starts to give you defining in a bold way the gaps and chasms to cross. Because in the ordinary world of, just run the business, expand, and improve, you minimize the gaps. The last thing somebody wants to hear is you have an impossible challenge. in breakthrough? Man, throw those impossible challenges at me. I want to know what they are. I start to build bridges over those chasms. Now, so you're going to be doing that today. The first part of building the bridge is we'll call idea mining, like data mining, idea mining. What do? You mine the best practices and exemplars, and you look at that. You'll be doing that today. You mine for positive outliers. Where are there actually some positive examples of something really remarkable happening, but the mass of it is still mired in the muck? The lone voice. The person who says something's possible and no one's listening. You start, what are those? You're mining those. And you're mining for ideas that come beyond your own field of expertise because you're talking to people from other fields and going, what do you see? What might we do? So that one whole idea of building bridges is this idea of idea mining. Then there's this other whole area called disruptive thinking. Out-of-the-box thinking, I call it disruptive thinking, where there's really a whole toolkit for disruptive thinking. But the two that are just right at the top is, one, hidden assumptions. You can see that in the mining example, all the things we assume. We just put them on the table and started to find creative ways around that, just by making them visible. And the second thing is provocations, things that, what if, that leap you to a different kind of thinking. Now, a word on why things fail. I look at why things fail a lot. All futures are not the same. So when you wake up in the morning, you wake up into a predictable future. You go to the office, you know what your day is going to be like. You know the good stuff, you know the bad stuff, but you know what your day is going to look like, and you know who people are, and you know problems. And you know, if I said to you, what amount of your day is surprising to you, like really surprising to you? There's a predictable future that you wake up into every day, and your actions are matching that predictable future. At the outset, when you're creating something bold, imaginative, aspirational, it is far away, it's small, it's faint. So now, which future do you think you act into? The one that's predictable, or the one that's faint, far away, unclear? That's why this idea of putting on a hat, taking off a hat, having the language of old game and new game, because the predictable future is habit forming. It's a habit.